Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're exploring an absolute paradox. America is the richest and most powerful country in history, but its rise to the #1 spot, it was entirely unexpected. Actually, if we look back, the nation almost failed multiple times. It definitely wasn't the result of some flawless grand master plan.
Okay, let's just dive right into this. How exactly did a massive continent that sat largely ignored by European powers for over a century transform into the world's absolute dominant nation? Well, surprisingly enough, it all started with some genuinely terrible math.
Christopher Columbus was practically desperate to win the race to India, to lock down those valuable trade routes before the Portuguese could get there. To convince the King and Queen of Spain to fund his voyage west, he pitched this really radical idea. He argued that the ancient Greeks had totally miscalculated the size of the Earth, and that the planet was actually a lot smaller than everyone thought. Based on this very wrong math, he sailed west, completely unaware that a giant continent was blocking his path. Here is the roadmap for our explainer today. We'll be covering 1. Initial miscalculations. 2. The colonial land grab. 3. Revolution and a new nation. 4. Expanding coast to coast. 5. Civil war and reunification. And 6. The rise of a global power.
Section 1. Initial miscalculations.
So Columbus gets back, and he has to admit he didn't find the spices he promised. But he did find something else to keep the Spanish royals happy: gold. And the Spanish king's response was incredibly simple: convert the locals and bring back that gold. Because of this, the Spanish focused almost entirely on the southern parts of the Americas where the gold and silver actually were, completely ignoring the vast, seemingly useless lands to the north. Just look at the sheer amount of time passing here. North America sat essentially ignored by European powers for over 100 years. The Spanish checked it out in 1539, found absolutely zero gold, and left. The English finally tried to plant a colony in 1585 at Roanoke, but it mysteriously vanished. It wasn't until 1607 at Jamestown, and shortly after with the strict Christmas-banning Pilgrims in Plymouth, that the English finally secured a permanent foothold.
Section 2. The colonial land grab. Fast forward to 1754. It was finally time for a war to figure out who truly owned America. But just look at this massive population mismatch. New France only had about 60,000 people, the British colonies, over 1 million. Both sides teamed up with Native American tribes, but with that kind of overwhelming numerical advantage, the outcome was almost inevitable.
So the crucial point here is that Britain absolutely wins the war in 1763. They take Canada, they take half of Louisiana. But here is the first massive domino falling. Winning that land practically bankrupted the British Empire. And that huge war debt, it forced them into a desperate move that would change history forever. Section 3. Revolution and a new nation.
Let's track this chain reaction because it's pretty wild. Britain's massive war debt led to heavy colonial taxes. Furious at having no vote in the matter, the colonies protested, eventually sparking a revolution and declaring independence in 1776. But even after winning their freedom, those 13 colonies were basically functioning as failing independent states. It wasn't until the 1789 Constitution and the election of George Washington that the nation actually began to function properly.
Section 4. Expanding coast to coast.
So how exactly did this small, fragile new country get more land? Well, this sets up the next great accident of history. It involves the vital trade route of the Mississippi River, a secret backdoor deal, and a very notorious French dictator. Enter Napoleon. He had just secretly acquired the massive Louisiana territory back from Spain. The Americans were absolutely terrified he would block their access to the Mississippi River, so they sent representatives to France just to buy the port city of New Orleans. But Napoleon had a totally different problem. He needed cash right then to fund his upcoming invasion of Britain. So, rather than try to build an empire in North America, he decided to sell the whole thing to America just to spite the British. And the price tag was simply staggering: $15 million. For that incredibly low number, the United States instantly doubled in size. And honestly, the timing couldn't have been more perfect. The American population was exploding right then, doubling every 20 years, with the average family having 7 children. All those people needed a place to live, and the great push west began.
What happened next was an absolute blur of rapid expansion. In just 50 years, the entire map was redrawn. The U.S. bought Florida, annexed Texas, fought a brutal war with Mexico to acquire the entire Southwest for $25 million, and split the Oregon Territory with Britain. Suddenly, in the blink of an eye, historically speaking, the nation stretched from sea to shining sea.
Section 5. Civil War and Reunification.
Of course, all that rapid expansion brought the issue of slavery to a boiling point. By 1860, the division across the country was stark. In the northern states, slavery was illegal and increasingly viewed as a great moral evil. Meanwhile, in the southern states, slavery remained legal and was a foundational, vital part of their economy. When Abraham Lincoln was elected, the southern states, fearing he would abolish slavery altogether, separated to form their own country. This triggered a devastating, bloody civil war. Ultimately, the North won, the slaves were freed, and the Union was violently preserved.
Section 6. Rise of a Global Power.
Now, after surviving the war, the reunited country kicked things off with another unbelievable real estate bargain. Just $7 million. That was the tiny price paid to the Russian Tsar for the entirety of Alaska. And the crazy part? It was hashed out in a hasty, late-night negotiation by Secretary of State William Seward. And then you have things like this, the Guano Island Act. Yes, this is a real law. It allowed literally any U.S. citizen to claim an unoccupied island for the United States, as long as it was covered in bird droppings. Now, why bird droppings? Well, they were highly prized for fertilizer and gunpowder. It's a bizarre, almost humorous way the U.S. quietly began expanding its footprint way out into the Pacific Ocean.
All of this perfectly set the stage for one final imperial push. American businessmen orchestrated the takeover of Hawaii to secure a vital naval base. Then, down in Cuba, an American warship sank in a very mysterious explosion. The U.S. quickly blamed Spain, declared war, and swiftly stripped Spain of its final colonies, taking Cuba, Puerto Rico, and the Philippines. Ironically enough, the global empire that Christopher Columbus had kickstarted centuries earlier was officially dismantled by the United States.
And the whole shebang culminates right here. Under President Theodore Roosevelt, the U.S. built the world's second-largest navy. By literally carving out a new country called Panama, they secured the rights to build the Panama Canal, finally completing it in 1914. This was a massive game-changer, allowing their giant fleet to seamlessly move between oceans. America had officially become a superpower, right as the globe plunged into World War I.
So when we look back, we realize it wasn't some preordained destiny. It was a wild, unpredictable series of miscalculations, bankruptcies, cheap land buys, and conflicts that actually built the United States. From Columbus's terrible math to a global naval power, it leaves us with a really fascinating question. If history is this accidental, what unexpected domino is going to fall next to shape the next 400 years? Thank you so much for learning with me today on this explainer. Until next time, keep questioning the history you think you know.